Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from London. I'm Giles Gibson. Let's take a look at the latest headlines. Russia claims it's holding more than 6,000 Ukrainian POWs a day after a major prisoner swap. The European Court of Human Rights is ordering Russia to ensure that two Britons held captive in a breakaway region of Ukraine do not face the death penalty. The UK's charity watchdog launches an investigation after concerns that family members of NHS fundraiser Sir Tom Moore could be personally profiting from his charity. Israel's Foreign Minister Yair Lapid is set to take over as caretaker Prime Minister at midnight. That's after Israeli lawmakers dissolved parliament, forcing the country into its fifth election in less than 4 years. And the IMF says that Sri Lanka should stamp out corruption and raise taxes to rescue its economy after bailout talks. Let's start off with our top story, and Russia says its troops are leaving Snake Island in the Black Sea, claiming it's a goodwill gesture to allow Ukraine to export agricultural products. The announcement came after Kiev launched several raids on Russian forces on the island, which is just off the coast of Ukraine.
On June 30, as a gesture of goodwill, Russian armed forces complete their tasks on Snake Island and withdrew the garrison station there. This decision will mean Kiev cannot speculate on any impending food crisis or say that it is impossible to export grain due to Russia's total control of the northwestern part of the Black Sea. Now it's up to the Ukrainian side, which has not yet cleared its Black Sea coastline of mines, including in waters near its ports.
Meanwhile, a day after NATO called Russia the biggest threat to its alliance, Moscow has ramped up its offensive in eastern Ukraine. Kiev says it's trying to evacuate residents from the eastern city of Lysychansk, which is currently the focus of Russia's attacks. Around 15,000 people in the city are facing relentless shelling from Russian forces. Despite a mounting death toll, though, Russia's President Vladimir Putin says that what the Kremlin calls its special military operation is going according to plan.
The work is going calmly and rhythmically. As you can see, the troops are moving and reaching the lines that are set as a task at a certain stage of this combat work. Everything goes according to plan. So there is no need to talk about time. I never talk about it, because this is life, there are real things. It is wrong to adjust them to some deadlines.
Now, President Putin also claims that Russian forces are not targeting civilian sites. That's after at least 18 people were killed in a Russian strike on a crowded mall in the city of Kremenchuk in central Ukraine.
The Russian army does not strike any civilian targets. We do not need to. We have every opportunity to determine what is where, and with modern high-precision long-range weapons, we strike these targets.
On Wednesday, Ukraine announced the two sides had also carried out the biggest exchange of prisoners since the invasion started. The Ukraine's military intelligence agency says the majority of their released prisoners were badly wounded, suffering from gunshot and shrapnel wounds, plus some other injuries.
Повернули додому We have returned home 144 Ukrainian fighters from Russian captivity, including 59 National Guard fighters, 38 Navy fighters, 28 Armed Forces fighters, 17 border guards, and 1 policeman. The oldest among the released fighters is 65 years old. The youngest is 19. In particular, 95 Azovstal defenders are coming home.
95 захисників Азовсталі.
Meanwhile, the UK has announced an additional $1.2 billion in military aid to Ukraine. The British Foreign Secretary Liz Truss also called on NATO members to step up their support for Ukraine.
All we can to continue to support Ukraine with the weapons they need to win this appalling war. Because if we don't, it means that there'll be much greater threat for European security in the future. Today, we've announced an extra £1 billion of military aid to Ukraine to help them push Russia out of their territory. And we have to focus on keeping going, keeping the support going to Ukraine, keeping the sanctions on Russia, and really ignoring the rhetoric from Vladimir Putin. What matters is what happens on the ground.
Now, for more on this story, let's cross live to our correspondent Sally Patterson, who is here in London as well. Sally, just break down for us what is in this latest support package from the UK government.
Well, as we heard there, this was a big announcement early local time on Thursday morning, an extra £1 billion or around $1.2 billion. Now, what's quite interesting about this budget is that it's formed of both government or departmental underspends, but also is made up of budgets from both the Welsh and the Scottish parliaments. Now, these are both devolved, and normally those governments focus on domestic matters, and foreign issues are left to Westminster UK government. So for these individual countries to be offering their own support is very telling of how strong their desire is to want to show their support for Ukraine amid the war. And so this total of $1.2 billion roughly doubles what the UK has already spent on military support for Ukraine. They've also spent an additional £1.5 billion on economic and humanitarian aid. So this makes the UK probably the second biggest supporter in terms of financial aid, second only to the United States, which recently promised $40 billion to Ukraine. But addressing the NATO conference in Madrid from video call, Ukrainian President Zelensky said that it's costing Ukraine around $5 billion every month to keep up the war effort. So really there is need, he says, for more support from NATO allies in order to fend off Russian soldiers.
Thanks for that, Sally. Stay with us. We're going to come back to Sally later in the programme on some more news. But right now we're going to cross live to Madrid, where Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister, is addressing the media. Take a listen.
On the second point, yes, I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to get. Not that it's been wonderful being here in Madrid, as you want. As indeed, I enjoyed being in Kigali and Germany. But there's no place like home. So I'm keen to get back. On your point about where we're trying to, what's the goal? We can't be more Ukrainian than the Ukrainians. Everybody understands that. It's for Volodymyr Zelensky, his people to decide what they want to do. Whether they want to cut a deal with Russia to make some kind of peace, of course, that's entirely a matter for them. Though I noticed that after the attack on the shopping centre, I think I saw a poll saying that 89% of Ukrainians would under no circumstances contemplate a land for peace deal. So, I can see the difficulties in Ukraine. Our job is simply to vindicate the principle, to stand up for the principle of the right of the Ukrainians to protect themselves. That's what we're doing. That's what everybody in the alliance is doing. And we want to give them the means to repel the Russians, to expel the Russians from the territory that they have occupied, because that is the right thing under international law. And as everybody has said, we want at the very least to put Zelensky in the best possible position he could be in if and when he decides that there is anything to talk about. But at the moment, let's be absolutely clear, there doesn't seem to be anything to talk about, because it's not only that the Ukrainian people would find it very difficult to do a deal, Putin isn't even offering a deal. He isn't even offering a deal. I mean, under those circumstances, it is only logical and right to continue to support Ukraine in the way that we are, and indeed to continue to intensify that military support. Because I think that they do have the potential to turn this round. We've seen what Ukraine can do to drive the Russians back. We've seen what they did around Kiev, around Kharkiv, now on Snake Island. I think the right thing for us is to keep going on the course that NATO has set out, no matter how difficult it may be. And that's what this summit has certainly agreed. Romilly Weeks of ITV.
Two. I'll shout too. Prime Minister, the American assessment is that the war in Ukraine could grind on for an extended period of time. Do you really think you've won the argument amongst fellow leaders to support Ukraine to the bitter end? And do you think you can sustain an appetite for that back home?
So, Romilly, I think it's a...
And that was Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, taking questions from reporters on the sidelines of the NATO summit in Madrid. That's after the UK had earlier on announced a new military support package, £1 billion. That's about $1.2 billion for the Ukrainian armed forces. Well, let's move on now to some other news. And tensions between the UK and the EU over the Brexit agreement are building once again. Earlier this week, British MPs voted to move forward a bill that would allow ministers to scrap certain parts of the Brexit deal, in particular the Northern Ireland Protocol. And now, speaking at an event in London, the bloc's chief Brexit negotiator has accused the UK of effectively putting a gun on the table by introducing the legislation. Before his speech, Maroš Šefčovič also said that the EU is willing to negotiate, but only if the talks are constructive.
Thanks to the protocol, we prevented a hard border on the island of Ireland and ensured that Northern Ireland can continue to benefit from the peace process in full. For this very reason, the EU cannot and will not accept this delicate balance being unilaterally and illegally disapplied because of an outright U-turn by the UK government. And it is worth underlining that it is not for London to unilaterally change the game and decide what enters in the EU's single market. Such an approach the clear violation of international law.
Now, while the EU says that changing parts of the protocol will undermine peace in the region, the UK has maintained that it will help fix certain customs issues. The protocol is part of the 2019 Brexit deal, which was signed between the UK and the EU. As part of the protocol, Northern Ireland remained part of the EU single market. That was to avoid a hard border with the Republic of Ireland. The UK insists it's not functioning as intended, that's the protocol, and must be amended. All right, let's go back to our correspondent, Sally Patterson, who's been very patiently standing by in London. Sally, what's the reaction been here in the UK from the British government to those comments made by Maroš Šefčovič?
Well, Giles, as you heard moments ago, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been, for the last few days at least, very distracted by what's going on in Madrid at the NATO summit. So we haven't seen much reaction from him or from Foreign Secretary Liz Truss. However, we know that the UK is in a position where it will not give in what it says is giving in, and it will not let the EU walk all over Northern Ireland. And that's why the chief negotiator for Brexit his words were very, very strong, and he used this quite aggressive imagery of the gun on the table. And that's because, unsurprisingly, that is how the EU is taking these, what it says, are unilateral changes in post-Brexit agreements. Now, Maros Sefcovic did say that he was joking that actually it's now the EU wanting to get Brexit done, whereas the UK has not been negotiating for the last few months. They haven't been coming around the table. And he is, of course, harking back to an old Conservative slogan of getting Brexit done. And he said the Foreign Secretary's Liz Truss plan was illegal, would create uncertainty and would not work. He said that this would be a lose-lose situation for EU and UK relations, and first and foremost for Northern Ireland. Now, as you say, earlier in this week, we saw a vote which the government side won by 74 votes, which will see this bill, this very controversial bill, take its next step forward. However, there is still quite a long way for it to go before it becomes ratified and law. It needs to go over to the House of Lords, and there is expected to be quite a lot of opposition. So this controversial bill is very much not guaranteed yet.
Thanks for that, Sally. Yeah, this is a story that's not going away anytime soon. That was our correspondent in London, Sally Patterson. Let's stay with UK news now, and the British Deputy Prime Minister Domonic Raab is facing accusations of sexism after winking at Labour's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner in Parliament on Wednesday. They were stepping in for their respective leaders for the weekly Prime Minister's questions. The Deputy PM took up the issue of rail strikes that we've seen recently here in the UK, and he accused Rayner of being a champagne socialist. And as Tory MPs were jeering at Rayner, Domonic Raab winked from across the benches. In no time, Labour MPs took to Twitter to condemn Raab. MP Toby Perkins, for example, said that he could never unsee Domonic Raab's wink from the dispatch box at Angela Rayner, to which Rayner responded, "Imagine how I feel." However, sources close to Domonic Raab have claimed that he was actually winking at Shadow Scottish Secretary Ian Murray.
Also providing a part. As all members will know, Hong Kong's historic success.
Let's move on to some other news on the other side of the world now, and Chinese President Xi Jinping has arrived in Hong Kong to attend events marking 25 years since the handover of the territory from the UK to China. It's Xi Jinping's first trip outside of mainland China since the start of the coronavirus pandemic, and Hong Kong streets are full of colour as well as high security arrangements as the city gets ready to welcome the Chinese president.
Over the recent past, Hong Kong has faced severe difficulties and won over challenges time after time. After weathering the storm, Hong Kong has been reborn of fire and has emerged with bubbling vitality. The facts have proved that one country, two systems has great vitality. It can guarantee long-term stability and prosperity in Hong Kong and defend the well-being of Hong Kong people. One country, two systems is a good system.
Now, the city is also set for the inauguration of its new chief executive, John Lee.
My team and I will reach out, listen to, and communicate with the public with sincerity. We will be proactive in winning the trust of the people and make policies that meet with demands. We are committed to serving the aspirations and concerns of the people, enhancing efficiency and effectiveness of the administration. Together, we will build a better Hong Kong.
Lee was selected for the job by a small election committee stacked with Communist Party loyalists. He's a former police officer and he ran opposed in these elections in Hong Kong. He is the fifth chief executive of the former British colony that was handed back to China from the UK in 1997. Lee was also a key figure in that crackdown on pro-democracy protesters that we saw starting in 2019.
Nobody has been held accountable for the riots in 2019 except the rioters, and they are being held to account by the government day after day after day. The government itself, that made serious mistakes in 2019, has never been held to account. Instead, one of those who made mistakes, a policeman, is the new leader. So what does that tell to people about accountability? I mean, it says, well, nobody can be held accountable except you people who rioted in 2019.
Hong Kong's 25th anniversary of the handover comes as Beijing continues its crackdown on political dissent. China imposed a new national security law in June of 2020, which allows punishment for anybody found guilty of acts of subversion, terrorism, collusion with foreign forces and secession.
I think the government cannot stop us from expressing our views on topics like government policies, especially those that affect people's livelihoods, union rights and rights of citizens. Even though we face restrictions, we should insist on doing as much as we can to speak out for our citizens.
Let's stay in Southeast Asia, and Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has been sworn in as the new president of the Philippines. He won elections last month in a landslide, and he's also the son of the late dictator Ferdinand Marcos. And as he took his oath of office, Marcos praised his controversial father's legacy.
Your vote, you rejected the politics of division. I offended none of my rivals in this campaign. I listened instead to what they were saying, and I saw little incompatibility with my own ideas about jobs, fair wages, personal safety, and national strength, and ending want in a land of plenty. I believe that if we but focus on the work at hand and the work that will come to hand, we will go very far under my watch.
For the inauguration, more than 15,000 police, soldiers and Coast Guard personnel were deployed across the Philippines capital. This marks really a stunning comeback for the Marcos family. Of course, after Ferdinand Marcos was ousted by a popular revolt back in 1986. Marcos Jr. is taking office as his country faces challenges really on multiple fronts. The country's economy has been ravaged by COVID-19, and inflation is also pushing up the cost of living. In a country of roughly 110 million people, nearly a quarter live on less than $2 per day. Marcos Jr. has made tackling inflation, boosting GDP and growth, and ramping up food production his main priorities as he takes office. He's also pledged to defend the country's presence in the disputed South China Sea, which Beijing claims for itself almost entirely. Now, earlier we were joined by journalist Dave Grunbaum from Manila, who explained more about some of those challenges facing the new president.
Yeah, so people are already weighing in. It's basically what you expect. The supporters, well, they're praising the speech as something that's forward-thinking, painting bold visions and a positive image for this country. They're all behind him. Then you have his detractors who say it's just more of the same. One big thing that he brought up, he said that we're not going to look back to the past, look ahead to the future. Well, clearly, although not said that way, but clearly a reference to his father. His father was a dictator who ruled this country for 20 years. Thousands of people tortured, killed, and disappeared under his watch. His detractors have long been saying they want to get an apology from Marcos Jr., but still no even acknowledgement from that yet so far at any point from Marcos Jr.
Let's move on to some sports news now, and two-time champion Andy Murray has suffered his earliest defeat at Wimbledon ever. He lost in the second round to the American 20th seed John Isner. Murray was unable to break the 6'10" Isner's serve even once, but he battled hard before going down in 4 sets. Murray and Isner had played 8 times previously, but they were meeting for the first time at Wimbledon, with Murray having won all 8 of their previous encounters. Isner had come through a pretty gruelling 5-set battle in the first round, and also at 37, he is 2 years older than Andy Murray. Murray had a succession of injuries since 2017, including having major hip surgery. Isner's main weapon is his serve, which comes down from over 7 feet. Isner took the first set in 40 minutes. The second set wasn't so easy on the eye as both players dialed up their serving intensity. I apologise, you can probably hear a fire alarm going on here in the studio, but we're going to try and continue here. There were no break points and it went down to a tiebreaker, which Isner clinched. And it was a similar story in the third, with the American dominant at the net. Murray then pounced on some rare errors from Isner.
That's what he has. 3 set points he's earned. That was a tennis masterclass by John Isner. Andy Murray should be proud of himself for the effort that...
There are many other... this is right, Arab.